Happy Friday, everyone. This is The Street Live. I'm Jeff Marks, standing on the floor of the New York Stock Exchange with Jim Cramer. Jim, we got a nice bounce back from yesterday's sell-off. What are you watching today in the market?
Shout out to Mark Sebastian, who's our VIX expert on real money, who, holy cow, said, don't believe there's going to be a big downturn. It was a buying opportunity. All we needed to see, yesterday we talked about, look, you want to look where treasuries might be going, not where they are. And they had this we had the blip down in yield. You'll come back a little and look at this coiled spring for a lot of companies, particularly for the banks. We were talking about whether to buy Wells. The banks are about to report their earnings. But wow, you see how much money there is once they get in. The moment that people think that the market's done going down. It's very heartening. And the banks are up huge this year. And people, JP Morgan caught a bid. We talked about that yesterday. Goldman caught a bid. But Wells is very right going into the quarter.
Yeah, we're going to talk a little bit more about Wells later, but before we do, I want to first turn our attention to your real money column from this morning. You talked about the state of the economy and the recovery, and you didn't describe it as a U or an L or a V. Rather, it was a check mark. Yeah. So what makes you think a check mark recovery of the economy?
Like Levi Strauss, okay, this morning I had Chip Berg on, and Chip Berg's a friend of the show. We've been to his factory, and the best factory that he has. And one of the things that's incredible to me is his numbers are way over 2019. So a check means your numbers are way over 2019. Costco, fabulous numbers last night.
Numbers last
and
night.
one of our companies that we've been through thick and thin with Costco, we're up probably, I don't know, maybe 100 points if you include the dividend.
Yeah, the special div.
Right. Yeah. So again, what you're seeing are companies that were not ready. One of the things that I know, the supply chain problems everywhere, but that's because of the check. No one expected things to go. There was the L, where people said the economy's going to flatline. That was long-term, COVID. Then there was the U, where people said, you know what, there's enough stimulus that maybe the economy can come back. And then there was the V, where we saw the economy coming back. And now there's the check, because the economy's on fire. And rates are low. Home builders doing great. The whole retail supply chain is out of whack because the sales are so incredible. We've got the child credit coming, and we can talk about how yesterday American Eagle Outfitters. But what we're seeing basically is an economy that's far better than 2019. Now, 2019, if you recall, we had 3.5% unemployment. We've got much higher unemployment now, but we have much more stimulus now. I still believe that we are going to see more people come into the workforce when it's advantageous to not keep trying to get. I mean, I want people to understand, when let's say you run a restaurant like we do, 7 people might say that they're going to come in and interview. 1 shows, and 1 turns you down because you're not offering enough money, and we're offering $18 now. It's not enough.
Now, does pent-up demand have a role to play too? And I know just people willing to spend after the pandemic. I know with Chip Berg and Levi's, they said 35% of the people changed waist sizes since the pandemic. That's fascinating.
That's why you want to own American Eagle Outfitters, because you've got young people who have not changed their wardrobe. They're flocking to the mall. Notice Simon Property Group doing quite well. And I think American Eagle Outfitters, I'm not being hyperbolic when I say it could run 15 points here. Well, after what I heard what Chip Berg said. 15, not 5. 1-5.
All right, there you have it. Now let's turn our attention back to the broader market. Now, obviously, a lot of selling yesterday. You talked about last night on the show that the Delta variant had a major role in that, and the canceling of the Olympics, spectators at the Olympics played a role too.
The futures dropped dramatically when that happened, because what that said was, oh man, maybe the variant's bad. And then I do some work. How could it be that only 15% of Japan is vaccinated? I mean, Japan is an advanced nation. That's a travesty. China, by the way, the Chinese cut the reserve rate. Why did they do that? Well, the China vaccine doesn't work. Or it works like our flu vaccine, where we know that it prevents some, but not all. I mean, these are countries, China's too proud to maybe use Moderna. I think they'll partner with the partner that Pfizer has in Germany. That's why that stock's going up. But, we've got an economy here where we're, with the exception of certain parts of the country that are, fortunately or unfortunately, linked with who voted for Trump. You've got a country that's done the vaccination since Biden came in very, very well, and that's good for business, even as he seems to be bent on hurting business.
Let's talk about what Pfizer's doing real quick before we start talking about some of the executive orders that just are coming out from the White House. Now, Pfizer, they announced yesterday they are working on a booster shot, a third shot that could potentially target the Delta variant. And we're also hearing news from Merck that they're developing an antiviral as well that is going well. So what do you think about these two pharma companies?
Merck has got a small trial. The antiviral is perhaps the most important thing you can have. Because one of the things that we need is to be like Tamiflu. You get sick, you get better. That's what we really want. Right now, it's either you don't get it or you do, and if you do, you're damned, and if you don't, you're okay. I think that so that's very, very important. Pfizer, there's a lot of dispute about whether you need a booster. Most of the good doctors I talked to say you don't, but in Israel they said that people who have been vaccinated 5-6 months ago who are senior citizens need a booster. So some people might think that Pfizer is being greedy, but if you follow the Israeli data, and remember, and that's just a small sample, the Israeli data says that you need a booster if you're in a higher risk category. I read these things and said, bring the booster on. I want a booster. I mean, why not? I mean, one of the things that I really disdain about the people who don't get it is that they might be people who get the flu vaccine. And now Dr. Topol came on Mad Money last night and said the FDA, by keeping this as an emergency vaccine instead of an approved vaccine, has made it so it's very difficult for companies to compel people to take it. Once it is an approved vaccine and not emergency, legally they can say, you got to take it or you're fired.
Now, Pfizer and Moderna, they've done such great work developing these highly effective COVID-19 vaccines. But if you look at the difference in the stocks, they've been completely different. Moderna has been a very strong performer. Meanwhile, Pfizer, it's just stuck in the mud. What do you think Pfizer needs to do to change that?
Pfizer's got a very bad patent cliff. So Pfizer has to buy someone. I posited they should buy Biohaven, because Biohaven is an independent stock that happens to have the world's best migraine drug, and there's 30 million people who suffer from migraine in our country alone. Meanwhile, that stock just keeps it's doubled since I've been saying that. Pfizer is a well-run machine, but does not have the innovation that we would like to see. They need to buy. They need to buy someone. Moderna is working with Merck on personalized cancer vaccines. And that could be explosive.
All right, let's turn our attention back to the White House. So yesterday there was a report out that the White House was targeting the railroads with some of their pricing, and now they're also going after big tech, going after their data collection, anti-competitive practice. What do you think about all this regulation that's coming after some of these companies?
Very anti-business presidency. Far more than Obama. Obama initially was anti-business, but then came to make peace with business and just chose not to focus on it, frankly. Had an agenda and then realized this agenda was not going to get through after the initial first 2 years. Look, I'm mystified by President Biden. He's using a shotgun when he should use a rifle. Maybe KSU shouldn't merge with Canadian Nat. Maybe there are companies that are unregulated in the banking business that should be regulated. But the idea, and maybe that you should have people in the FTC and in antitrust who are very rigorous, and if a deal's not going to be like T-Mobile, which it lowered prices, maybe it should be stopped. But just saying, listen, we need to be tougher on business, that seems to be pandering to people who are upset with big business and feel like it got too big a good deal under President Trump.
Let's look at it through the lens of Amazon. Now, part of this executive order, they want to keep prices down for families, but they also want to boost wages at the same time. And when I think about Amazon in the pandemic, they went on a hiring spree. And whenever Amazon raises their minimum wage, they often force other companies to follow suit. So why Amazon? Why is this just such a big target?
Well, look, I think that both Republicans and Democrats don't like Amazon, and they don't like it because it's put a lot of companies out of business. A lot of mom and pops were destroyed by Amazon, but a lot of mom and pops were destroyed by Walmart. And I get concerned when we have companies that the average person loves that are under attack by Washington, when there's so many other causes that they should be addressing. When you attack a company like Amazon that has lowered prices dramatically for you, I say shame on government. The government's just barking up the wrong tree. I think the president is going to have to get a little more sophisticated about the way business works. I know that's a loaded term to use the term sophistication. It implies that he's dumb. He's not. But business works in a particular way, and he seems to be tone deaf about it.
Let's move on to Boeing. Now, there was a report that came out late in the trading day yesterday that said China, they may be willing to do test flights for the Boeing 737 MAX, which is still hasn't been recertified in the region yet, but this would obviously be a big step towards that progress. Now, Boeing has said previously that they're looking for a second half 2021 recertification timeline in China, but you still urge some caution on Twitter. Why is that?
Reasons. One is that I think the quarter's going to be bad. There's no reason to think it's going to be good. Remember, they didn't win a lot of orders. Second, I look at the balance sheet and think if I were the new CFO, maybe I want to do an equity offering. And if they did that, that would be a great time to buy. And finally, since when is China doing anything for us? This regime, I mean, President Xi has the ability to say, you know what, I don't want the MAX. I think it's an unsafe plane. I think we seem to be very naive about President Xi's goal here. I mean, it's not much different from an Iron Curtain, and what I would not necessarily compare him to Stalin. I did that yesterday. It is a little more like Mao, Khrushchev. They didn't want to do a lot of business with the United States, and they succeeded in not doing a lot of business with the United States. That's, I think, a precept of Xi. He doesn't want to do a lot of business with us because that helps us. He doesn't want to help us.
All right, before we wrap for the week, let's look ahead to next week. Now, second quarter earnings season is going to officially kick off with many of the major banks reporting. You talked a little bit about Wells Fargo, JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs earlier on this show. We own Wells Fargo for the charitable trust. Now, what are you looking at specifically when the banks report? What do you want to hear?
Well, I want to hear loan growth. I mean, the American balance sheet's so solid that there hasn't been a lot of loan growth. I want to hear, of course, net interest margin, because people are totally hung up on that. I want to hear about, are there any bad loans? I think the bad loans continue to go down. But I increasingly want to hear what services and fees they are providing that are sticky enough that they just are built-in money. Because I think what has to happen is they have to become much more efficient, like the rails did. And the more efficient they get, the bigger the profits. And then maybe the focus won't be so much on net interest margin. I do think the rates have to go higher at a certain point, but let's not forget that some of where rates are controlled by the market. And when you look around the world with countries that have a lot of money, like Germany, they're not being a very good fiduciary if they buy German bonds.
Now, you mentioned bad loans going down, and I'm reminded of this time last year when everyone was kind of concerned about how much loans that the banks had on their balance sheets tied to energy companies. But with oil as high as it is, that has to be a positive sign that those companies can pay back their loans.
Absolutely, and Wells Fargo, on a percentage basis of their book, is the predominant oil lender. They bought a lot of, actually at the top, previous regime. But now they're coming back. So I suspect we'll get some positive commentary from Charlie Scharf, the CEO of Wells. I think his efficiency ratio is going to be much better, too.
All right, so let's stay tuned to those conference calls and those earnings reports next week. I'm Jeff Marks. That's the show for today. We'll see you Monday.